Great morning, great afternoon, great evening, wherever this conversation finds you. I am Travis Gray. This is Gray Transforms, and today we are blessed to be transforming with another great guest, my friend Remo Erma. Remo is a father of two, a passionate, lifelong student of transpersonal psychology, so just like myself, just like you, just like everyone that is tuning into the Great Transforms podcast. He is finishing his Master's of Science at Aleph Trust Institute and practicing psychotherapy and is a counselor, just an amazing human being. We met at the Eurotas conference this past September in Oxford. I'm so happy to have this conversation with you. Remo, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. Good to have you.
Awesome.
Good for you to have me.
Yeah, absolutely. We have each other. We have each other in this conversation. Remo is also the host of the New Paradigm Navigator podcast, so NPN. And I really enjoyed one episode that I heard with you, two other women. I'm not quite remembering the details of that conversation, but I just enjoyed the natural organic flow that the group had, and you're a great host for that podcast.
Yeah, it was Vishti and Lydia. We were having kind of a three-way trialogue, and they're also the core members of the NPNs, and we ourselves had been looking forward to that conversation for a long time because we kind of knew it would be really interesting to have both masculine and feminine present, and we talked about Jung and alchemy and tantra even a little bit. Yeah, it was really
Yeah.
wholesome. I think I even made some new creative discoveries like regarding archetypes and
Yeah, that's awesome. How did the New Paradigm Navigators, how did that come about?
so we started basically 3 years ago, a little more than that. So I'll speak to my story first. So I was just starting a lecture student. Now I'm basically finished. I'm just waiting for my paper. But back then I was going through, I think, Aleph Trust forums, and on some of the modules we have a collection of a library from the scientific and medical network from different like transpersonal, spiritual, psychological fields. A section, let's say, of presentations and videos and interviews. And that's how I found the SMN. And through LF Trust, we also get the free year on the SMN platform, who are basically doing that kind of content for almost 50 years now. Yeah. And I discovered them. And in their forums, I found like a new career opportunities section, and this is how I got in touch with Louise Livingstone, and she had just started a project basically with her colleague. How to call it? It's like heart led. I don't remember the exact like technique they or like framework they used, but the idea was to kind of birth a project without more in like a feminine energy, more like from the heart, rather than you have this idea and then I want to realize that, but more like listening to the heart and what emerges from there, and in that way kind of finding the people and envisioning a collective project. Basically at the beginning of that or right after that, I got in touch with Louise, and Louise had found some other people from other institutions and academy, and that's how it started. And then we started to dream, basically, what do we want to be, what would we like to do, what kind of projects would we like to birth and lead. And the podcast that you mentioned, the new Paradigm Navigators podcast, is one of them. Alongside it, we have led for 2 years now. So the third one is coming in the summer, which is an online conference called the Students of Spiritual Science Symposium, which is basically also to find people who are in academy, not necessarily in academy, actually, like also practitioners, artists who are also both interested in science and spirituality, and maybe even bringing them together or bridging them. And that's what we've done so far. And I think the last time, like it's been a blast, like both of them. But last time I felt like it is actually taking form and starting to kind of live its own life. And so now this third one, which we also call like a phase 3, this is going to be on New Earth is the overlying kind of umbrella theme, and we just launched the dates and put it in calendar, and are soon to be collecting different presenters and people who want to you know do something, not just presentations but also workshops, present their art. It's so far, I think that the main aim really for us has to be to gather a community of like-minded thinkers, practitioners, and create something awesome, create something beautiful.
Absolutely. I think that we are already a part of something awesome and beautiful as transpersonal psychologists. I love hearing all of those things that you're doing. Are you also, is that somehow related to Eurotas as an organization as well?
Currently, no. Like,
Okay.
so on
Maybe an
in Oxford.
opportunity there then.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I have that on my back burner, and that's why I'm also very happy to talk with you. And
Yeah.
I was involved for a short time in the Eurotas youth, kind of collective community
Yeah.
also some years ago, because even before Aleph Trust in my therapy school, which is led by Jure Pichonsky, where I now mentor. Through them, I discovered basically Eurotas and also some young people. And also, I'm really happy to be talking to you to see kind of the next generation of transpersonal thinkers and people. And this is also kind of what the NPN is about. In one sense, we are discovering the new paradigm as such, but also how to bring it about. How do we actually live it? Because we are already living it, honestly. But also to find, find fresh people into the field and into the scientific and medical network. And to Oxford, I came through the SMN, through the scientific and medical network. I was actually helping out them in their booth, and I was also very happy to see the people I've been working and studying with like over the last 3 years.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that we are a part of like the most important generation thus far. We're very powerful as a generation and we have a big responsibility just there's some logic around it, but maybe in some ways I and maybe yourself included are could be biased to our own egoic importance of our generation. But logically, we are a generation that was pre and post internet. We were like right in the culmination of internet happening, and then as internet was developed, we are now entering this age of AI, which is really interesting. But we still, there's going to be some challenges that humans face as AI is more and more online. I saw an article yesterday about, this is just a web article, so this wasn't. I saw an article that was speaking about the critical thinking skills being lost from people using large language models, like relying too heavily on the large language model, which is unfortunate and like very disappointing for me as a teacher, because I know how many of my students end up using AI for a lot of the work that they do, and I am every day promoting and advocating that we need to keep up our critical thinking skills. But I
Mm.
think that us
Hmm.
as like young professionals in this field, this is a big part of why I started podcasting, was that I wanted professionals of our generation and moving into the professional field of transpersonal psychology to know what a professional looks like what does it look like to be a professional in
Hmm.
this field. But this combination of science and spirituality, there's really no field that does it better than transpersonal psychology, that is more comprehensive, and just encompassing a wide array of lots of logical, maybe materialist science and behaviorist biological basis for human behavior. Those kinds of sciences and information is also totally integrated with the kinds of things that we do in the field of transpersonal psychology. It just has more breadth. It's more wide ranging and encompassing. So I think that we have a big, powerful responsibility to take on the torch. I see us as a part of the third generation of transpersonal scholars. So we have like a fatherly generation. And over this past weekend, I was able to be at a book discussion with James Fadiman, and hopefully I can get him on the podcast. But James Fadiman was around during those early conversations of transpersonal psychology when this field was just blossoming, developing. And he's the co-founder of the university that I attend and am a teacher of, and am very like embedded into the community over the last 10 years. And so that's the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. He was a co-founder of the original Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. And then when it became Sophia University that it is now, he sort of parted ways and just went on to do his own thing, which is perfectly fine. Maybe he found that just made sense for him in his life. But Sophia University, what it has blossomed into these days is really beautiful, but it has gone through its own hero's journey trajectory in doing that. I see like him and the founders of these institutions. Out of trust, I had Les Lancaster on the podcast. I love Les. Les
I like that
might be,
episode.
yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed that. He might be a part of a second generation. He's kind of fiddling between the fatherly generation and the motherly generations. For the conceptualization that I have for the history of the field in my brain, then the motherly, so the fathers like started this field, like got planted the seed kind of thing. And the motherly generation is very much well developed by figures like Rosemary Anderson, William Broad. They developed the transpersonal methods, So some of these scholars might fall, kind of in between the fatherly, motherly generation, but that motherly generation, kind of the ethos of it, is to give this field methods, to give transpersonal psychology a methodology to work with, or many methodologies, frameworks to work with, concepts to hold on to and work through, lenses to do research through, things like this. And so that is kind of the motherly generation. And I think that we are the third generation. We are taking on the torch. And in this age of information, we have, a part of that responsibility is to bring more awareness to this field of all kinds of people these days are interested in non-secular, non-dogmatic spirituality. A lot of people are identifying as spiritual but not religious, that kind of thing. This is transpersonal psychology, and they don't have this information. So we have a beautiful responsibility. We're doing a beautiful opportunity to do great things in the world as we lead and become the leaders and the elders of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So many talking points to answer to, but just to begin with, so Rosemary Anderson, like I actually used her method. So and William Broad's the intuitive research. So I actually just finished my thesis. What is it now? 4 months ago, using the intuitive research method, and overall, I think what like the transpersonal psychology is for me, or has done, maybe let's say the world part is still coming, but that the work it has already done is basically depoliticize spirituality and work out not just different frameworks but an actual language to talk about these phenomena and do it in an objective, intercultural, interracial manner. And that's kind of how I entered this field as well, was with the question of, like your podcast is like speaking with professionals in the field. That was my question as well. What does it look like to live this, to live these questions, to live this ethos? Like we can talk about that too, but I guess, like, so just a short intro from me as well, that for me, from a young age, I basically refused to stop believing in magic. I knew that there had to be somewhere magic in this world and in this reality from a quite a young age. Like, my family wasn't spiritual nor religious at all. Quite down to earth, like almost never been to church, and kind of open minded, but not active in any sort of like spiritual expression or practice. And so I was kind of a blank page. But I still remember like all these discussions I had with my stepfather when I was, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 years old, about the universe, aliens, consciousness, souls, things like that. And I was always taken in by them. And so kind of my second awakening after this disillusionment phase was when we started calling out spirits in my high school. And it's one thing to see the needle move. When you are critical, you'll just wipe it off as whoever's moving the needle, whoever you have your grudge against. But when you're actually doing it yourself and you know that you are not moving the needle, not consciously at least, then it starts to kind of break away this dogma of materialism. And basically then I started to look into esoterics, into all different religions, spiritualities, just really swallowing books. Like I was in my school, I finished the tasks in our classes, within 15 minutes of the 45-minute class, so I could read for the next half an hour these really interesting topics. And after a while, I actually found transpersonal psychology, and that stuck with me, because that was it made sense. There was logic in the thinking of these people, and not that there isn't in the ancient traditions. It's just that, it's been kind of lost with the languages. And with the transpersonal, it was talking about our times, our breakthroughs, our challenges, our questions. So it made sense to me. It rung for me, it felt alive. And, fast forward a few years, going into therapy, going through reading Wilbur and different phases of my development, I arrived at the question of, okay, I've now really consumed hundreds of books and information in this topic, and now I need to actually keep myself alive. I've done waitering for maybe like 5 years already, 4 years, something like that, and realizing that I don't want to keep doing this for very long. And then the question naturally arose of, how do I live this life? How can I help in this field? How I can contribute to this, development? Because, something that kind of stuck with me also was, this has been the mission for many wise and like the giants of philosophy and academy for me, or for psychology, Nietzsche, Jung, Rogers, Groff, transpersonal thinkers, all of them, which is that to bring science and religion together, again. So the last, I guess, 7 years or so, on and off, next to my family and children, I've been kind of living that question, what does it, how can I do that? How can I live that? And my answer so far has been also through media, through podcasting. I actually want to popularize and revive or take transpersonal into the mainstream. And at the same time, I also feel that I'm a little bit, neutral, in the sense that, that's also what I like about transpersonal, is that it isn't political, or it is like less political than all the rest. Of course it has political aspects, this is part of life, but it is, as objective as this can be. And personally, I feel even more kind of neutral, even more a little bit distant from even the field itself. It isn't that important to me which exact terms we use. If it's going to be transpersonal psychology in 10 or 20 years, maybe it's going to be something else. That doesn't matter to me. What matters to me personally is to take this, treasure trove of ancient and also modern wisdom that is already generated, through the 5 or 6 or 7 decades that this field has been, developing. Take this to the ordinary layman, take this to all the people who are really disillusioned by church, at the same time really disillusioned by nihilism and materialism and all of the politics of the world. that has its own interests, grinding us to bone, basically.
I love what you said about the depoliticizing spirituality. I love just the way that you're terming that, the language that you're using for that. The depoliticizing spirituality is beautiful. The field of transpersonal psychology has very much done that and continues to do that. It's not about one being better than the other, and if we are not learning from all of them, well, what are we actually doing here? Are we really scholars of spirituality and these different all of the ancient science and the Eastern traditions meeting the Western science? Are we really doing that as we are, as human beings are moving into the new world and into a new world altogether? A lot of like political talk is like, oh, we're trying to be more inclusive and we're trying to do this and that. And like, it strikes me as we are often not, as a society, as a human society globally, we are often not doing such a great job of being inclusive and depoliticizing things. But you're also right. Politics is life. It's life that human beings are going to have this political um, this political dance with one another in order to figure out, what is the best way forward. I like what you said about maybe in 20 years, the term will be different. Maybe it won't be transpersonal psychology. It'll be, Wilbur was very much a proponent of the integral rather than the transpersonal. My criticism of that for Wilbur was that I think that Wilbur, I would love to have a conversation with him or meet, have a personal interaction with him. But I think that he is sort of like, he wants a corner of the bookstore kind of dedicated to him. He wants a Wilbur corner of the bookstore, and so he's going to call that integral psychology, which is great. I love the California Institute of Integral Studies has done a great job in being a part of this as well. There's a collection of schools in the world, but like big names that kind of come up as like emergent institutions that are really aligned in the field of transpersonal psychology. That's Aleph Trust, the university that you go
Mm-hmm.
to, Sophia University, of course, California Institute of Integral Studies, Naropa University, Saybrook University. There's a handful of really great institutions that around the world. A lot of them I know about in America as well. I think that we do have like this, we have this role, this job to do, navigating the new paradigm. The power in the new paradigm is in the depoliticizing the things that are sort of like obstructions to our ways of thinking in sciences. Like if we get too material in our basis, for our paradigm basis is too material, too reductionistic, too determined, then we are not giving enough room for the malleability and the flexibility to learn new things. Like there's only so much that you can learn in that sort of limited, concretized thinking structure of like just modern conventional sciences. And so transpersonal psychology introduces this opportunity to be a lot more malleable, flexible, and a lot more room for the unknown, for the mystery of the world. And man, I love this field so much. What does the, and so what I was saying about the terms and things, I still like the term transpersonal psychology still resonates just fine with me. I love that it was a group of people that coined it, that got it together. Kind of the really Stanislav Grof like introduced transpersonal psychology being named that way. But the three main fathers of the field are Abraham Maslow, Stanislav Grof, and Anthony Sudich. I love this man, Anthony Sudich. I love his story, his hero's journey. But they all did this at Anthony Sudich's house, and he wrote the first articles on kind of attempting to define the field early on in like 1968 in the Humanistic Journal of Psychology, 1969, and we have like 69, 70, 71. That's the initial entries, the first editions of the Journal of Transpersonal Psychology, and that creates the field. And then you have like really great scholars that were early on in that. You have like Viktor Frankl, Ram Dass, Alan Watts. These are very popular names. That terminology has shifted, and what all of those things mean. I do still like the word transpersonal psychology.
Yeah, I think like Frankl and Rogers and Maslow, like I think really like humanism or humanistic psychology and existentialism or existential psychology, all of them kind of merge into transpersonal psychology. I do like it in terms of, you know, the name. I mean, it's nothing new. It's well known in the field. Is that you transpersonal alludes to the transcendent, you know, kind of function, the transpersonal. But you know, in all honesty, the field really, and this is an actual kind of module on our course in LF Trust as well, has, you know, gone further from just transcending the personal, but also reincorporating the personal and then embodying the personal and then taking this persona, this transpersonal persona, hopefully then, you know, back into the world through you know, whether it's political activism, whether it's, you know, all kinds of service we can give. So but that's kind of just from like intellectual point of view, my 2 cents.
How would you define transpersonal psychology? That was something I was interested in asking.
Yeah, well, I kind of use.
Because I'm sure you've ran into people. Hey, what do you do? I'm in this field of transpersonal psychology. What is that? I've had so many of those conversations in Ubers in the Bay Area, trying to tell the Uber drivers what I do. Sometimes I just
Mhm.
try to tell them I'm a psychologist just to move it on. But if it feels like the
Same.
conversation could go a place, then I tell them a little bit more about what the field is. Well, how would
Yeah,
you define
exactly.
that? How do you answer that?
Really similar. Like if it's that kind of situation, I usually also first say that I'm a psychologist. It's a little bit more niche. It's transpersonal psychology, which basically is an amalgam of psychology, spirituality, and religion. I usually say that, and if it's, you know, depending on the situation, I might also bring in, you know, a bit of psychedelics, a little bit of like hippie revolution. And when they are actually interested more, or this is, you know, a more like academic discussion, or I'm talking to another psychologist, maybe in another field, then I use basically what we learned in school, which is, you know, the three phases, which is, you know, the personal psychology, then the transpersonal psychology, and then bringing these two together into actual transpersonal studies or transforming the world and society around us. I would say like these are the three aspects I use to describe what we do, because this is a living field. At the same time, it's still kind of on the edges and still kind of niche
Mm-hmm.
in the wide world. And in that sense, like you were talking about Jung, I think Jung did a big service to the transpersonal, even though he wasn't in the transpersonal. He did a big
Right.
service to like kind of reviving and repopularizing this, or let's say non like analytical ways of thinking or cognition, and you know, paving the way for again symbolism and, you know, intuition and dreams and all of that,
Yeah,
synchronicities.
the field just didn't really exist yet when Carl Jung
Yeah.
was really doing his thing, but he has connections with like the likes of like Roberto Assagioli, the father of
Mhm.
psychosynthesis. That's great, the way that you defined it or learned it in school. That transpersonal studies element, that combining all of the knowledge that we know to inform the world as it moves forward and develops forward is great. For me, the definition that I come to is transpersonal psychology is the study of cultivating whole human transformation, and the assets of the whole being are body, mind, soul. And then if you take that another way to define that, is just the etymology of these words. It's
Mhm.
psychology has been the study of the soul, and that has transformed in maybe not good ways all the time, because psychology these days has become a study of ego and a
Mm-hmm.
study of personality and persona and behavior, rather than a study of the soul, which is the original etymology of the word. And then it's the
Mm-hmm.
study of the soul transcending, moving beyond, transforming the personal, the ego. So it's the study of the soul transforming the ego, as opposed to the study of the ego
Mm-hmm.
transforming other egos, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's a beautiful way to put it, and really just like kind of tells the whole story. I think a part of it is that we're kind of supposed to be on the edge. Abraham
Mm-hmm.
Maslow's book, The Farthest Reaches of Human Nature, that title is transpersonal psychology. It's about looking at the farthest reaches of human nature. But because of that, we're always going to be facing some challenges, maybe internally in the field as we go through our own heroes journey and trajectory. There's going to be strife and challenge and political kind of adversity that we face within ourselves as we, it's the growing pains of your transformative journey. That's exactly what happens in every transformative journey. Sophia University as an institution has experienced that a lot. And as the original Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, they're kind of supposed to. You ask for it in some way. And so being in this field, you ask for some of that adversity. You have to know that you're going to face that as we reach for the farthest reaches of human nature and continuing to push the edge of what we know and what we think and challenge those edges to continue to grow forward.
Regarding the farthest reaches, I think there's some important, like really important points there. And this criticism kind of, doesn't come from my heart in the sense that it's not emotional and it doesn't, it's not an attack. But in the other sense, it comes from my heart because it's the most kind of like natural part of my being that speaks to this, which is that this criticizes both Wilber and all the fathers of transpersonal psychology. And I know we have already also stepped important steps away from that, which is that, these farthest reaches really aren't farthest reaches. It's because of our materialist, capitalist, very politicized and Western centric philosophy or world view that this is the farthest reaches, when in reality, like this, I'm talking about spirituality, I'm talking about communing with the spirit, communing with the nature, communing with our deepest self, I'm talking about the soul. These things, they have been part of our experience since we opened our eyes on this planet, since our consciousness locked into this planet. And the locked, I don't mean that we are trapped here in the Gnostic sense. I mean that since we decided to become embodied, and in that sense, like getting a little bit political now, I think, all the churches, all our like institutions, our industries, they have in that sense hijacked our natural being in this world, which is spiritual, which is in connection with ourselves, with each other, and with the nature at large, and with the cosmos. You were speaking, mind, soul, and body. Let me add spirit to that as well, because that is where we all come from. Of course, it's hard to talk of spirit, and that's why it was, that's one of the reasons the church was so effective in hijacking the spirit and naming it whatever name they wanted to give to it. You know, so in that sense, like I agree, that is the reality, that is the culture, the situation we are in, where transpersonal, the spiritual in one sense, and this is so funny, like I talked about this all the time on my course with my course mates, with the teachers. On one sense, this is the farthest reaches, this is the mystical, and this is the what was the other word, exceptional, exceptional human experience, because they are exceptional, because they are paranormal, which means almost normal. And on the other side, they are paranormal, meaning normal, half normal, which means that throughout all the ages, throughout all the cultures, throughout, all, races, whatever other distinction you may want to do, ages, from little children to dying people, we have always had these experiences it's just become politically incorrect to talk about them because there are huge economical interests behind this hijacking of this domain of experience.
I hear what you're saying. The churches are able to hijack these conversations on spirit, but spirit it's a tough thing to speak about, to put words around, to articulate. The ancient Hebrews knew this, and that's why it was bad luck to name God. Trying to limit this it's so hard to speak about. Harris Friedman wrote a great article, kind of. He published an article that is like a blank page, and he said this is as close as you can get to the truth. And it just a published article, blank page. No, there's nothing written on it. The
Good
rationale
one.
is that this is the closest you can get to the truth. It was pretty ingenious. I really like it. It
Yeah, I
is
like his work
so
too.
challenging to put words on, and the churches, all these different religious, these religious
Enterprises.
institutions have been able to put words on it.
Yeah, yeah. I do like Friedman's work, and I know his stances, and in a weird manner, you know, I try to embrace the complexity of being human, and I think I'm quite. It's hard to. I think it's impossible to at least categorize me. I think there are a lot more like unipolar people than I am, and so in a weird sense, I agree with what Friedman is positing and doing in the sense of reserving science to science, basically, reserving objectivity or science to objectivity. We are kind of measuring and quantifying what can be measured and quantified. So in that sense, blank page for the spirit or for the capital T truth is the end of the conversation.
Mhm.
You can't name the unnameable. But on the other hand, and this is where my personal work comes in, and what I did my thesis on, which is the lived experience. Phenomenology also has roots, and also when you were talking about the birth of psychology or birth of transpersonal, the birth of psychology. So Wilhelm Wundt, basically thought to be the father of psychology, like he's like a quote from his mouth, and I might be wrong on this, so sorry about that. But I think that these words are from his mouth, which is that all our life in the fetus, we are developing organs for life on planet Earth. But in our body on planet Earth, we are developing our organs for the afterlife. That was the father of psychology, or at least one of them. Honestly, like to all the fathers of transpersonal psychology, to even the medicine as an industry, and like what you were talking about in the beginning of AI, and maybe newer generations losing their critical thinking. Honestly, I think it's the opposite. But I also give slack if that is the case. I give a lot of slack because how long have we had the internet? 30 years basically. We really haven't had time to accustom to prepare for it. And as having grown up with the internet, I also remember how bad it was in the beginning, even not so much time ago, like 4chan with its random, it's or random subsection. It has been a lot worse. And at the same time, there's this immense value in the novelty of technology, because I think this is a direct reflection of our own level or development of consciousness. And when these new technologies come out, they open up these new vistas, these new realms of potential reality. I think in that sense, like, I'm a big believer in technology, in the sense that I think through the technology we can both fall into tyranny, but we can also actually achieve decentralized democracy. I'm using word e-commerce because I'm not sure it's gonna be democracy. It's gonna be something, probably, and hopefully it's gonna be something better. But in the sense that we can actually decentralize decision making finances, freedom of thought, connection with other people, and in all these new ways, like the podcasts have enabled, for example.
Yeah, there's great opportunity with AI and things like that. But what you're saying, that we could fall into tyranny, or we create this new paradigm, or we navigate this new paradigm, or we we develop a new democracy, that kind of thing. I agree with you. We need to hold on, and I don't think it's impossible for us to do that. We need to hold on to the critical thinking skills, and it is man, right now in America, crazy how clearly people are seemingly,
Manipulated.
I can't speak for every human being. I've not spoken to every human being, but it seems like there's so many people that are just throwing their critical thinking skills right out the window. They can't see through their lens of hate, and their lens of hate is clouding every kind of critical, rational thought that they could have, and then they can't make really great decisions that are for the benefit of everyone. When you were talking about the farthest reaches of human nature, and I agree with you, and I understand that spirituality, spiritual experiences have been around for all of eternity, all of human experience, because we have been given consciousness. We've been given an awareness that allows us to tap into understanding what the existential truths are. We've been given this opportunity, the beyond ordinary experiences of things, and the connections of things, the associations of things. The farthest reaches of human nature, it could also mean just the reaching deep inwardly, as well as it's not just an external reaching out for the farthest reaches in the material world out there. It's also how far can we reach down into ourselves, and that is the human nature. That is likely really what that title is meant to speak to, is the reaching deep inside of ourselves, inside of our own human nature. How deep can we reach into that mystery? What can we pull out of that to inform how we are going to live better, more actualized lives, and actualize the potentials of the world?
Yeah, and not just completely agree, and not just reach into, but also feel into, really,
Yeah.
not just understand, but actually grasp, our genes, our story, our origin, and also the barely graspable, maybe, mm, future of us. And I am a sucker for that vision, for the future human. I truly believe that I have chosen to come here and help realize that in whatever small way I can. Yeah, yeah. And again, like I said, this, like, it isn't an attack. It's a well-known criticism, especially after kind of the Wilber phase in transpersonal psychology, which, like, did a tremendous job. I have massive respect and love for Wilber and his philosophy, but to also realize that we have stepped a bit further from that into actual participatory paradigm, and realizing that it isn't linear. The growth isn't linear. It's cyclical. It's spiral. Also, it's sometimes we go backwards, sometimes we go forwards, and there isn't kind of one direction or one destination. There isn't kind of one mountain with the mountaintop with one view. There's multiple mountaintops. There's a mountain range in terms of spiritual aspiration, and it's co-creative. It isn't just me kind of, that is the scientific objective kind of thinking applied into transpersonal, which is that I am the objective viewer and discoverer of truth, instead of being a discoverer and a creator at the same time. I do discover kind of the laws of the universe, but at the same time, I am the evolution, the manifestation of the universe, of this divine and mystical dance. And I am the dancer as well as the experiencer. And this is what we kind of talked to with Lydia and Vishti in that episode. You mentioned as well that I think we are now more and more stepping into the creator archetype, and into our divinity, coping with our divinity, which is precisely the the responsibility of creation, which can steer in a black and white manner into evil and good, or hell and heaven, but also coming out of the black and white kind of church reductionistic simplification of spirituality into also like the endlessly shaded and colored potential of reality we can manifest. And I
Absolutely.
think and to realize that, like, just to come to understand that, hold that potentiality and responsibility in your hand, that is a whole trip already. And that's where, for me, this integral thinking comes into play as well, because just yesterday I was speaking with Louise Livingstone, and just touching upon the politics of our world today, and again coming to the realization or remembering of having to live these questions, having to live these frictions, these polarities, and what it really means to live from this integrated or integral mindset and consciousness, which is to not only to not judge, but also to not judge people who aren't like you, which is who aren't like who are judging, to also not judge people who aren't on that level with you, and even like thinking about, oh, I'm on this level, this actually means that you're probably not. You're probably still in the ego phase when we start to like reflect like that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, some of those are like healthy criticisms of Wilbur's work. Like I love what you
Mhm,
just said about the mountain range. Like there's many mountaintops, many mountain range, and it is collaborative. There is a participatory aspect to this. So transpersonal psychology, in the classrooms and things like this, it's often experiential, and that hits a certain ceiling. Beautiful. It's a beautiful transformation of the traditional education paradigm of like lecture hall kind of
mhm,
things, but have an experiential learning environment. But then it does hit a very high ceiling. That's after the embodiment, after the gnosis, the learning of all of these things. Now I limited to just what I've been taught through these exercises, or can I add something to this? Is there something of unique experience that all of us have to add to this body of what we already know? And of course, all of our unique experiences and ideas and frameworks and things that we can be co-creative about to contribute to the field can be added, just as above so below. So like, just that idea is that the world, we've built houses, like humans have built houses and buildings and infrastructure, bridges, all kinds of things have been built into this tangible world, this material world. Well, we too can participate in the
mhm,
co-creation of the world of ideas, and just participating in the growth of how we know God. The problem with Wilbur is that the criticisms have been things like it's hierarchical in one
mhm,
direction, one river, one mountain, and
mhm,
it's the
mhm,
theory of everything and things like this. So it becomes very narrowed to, very concretized into his own approach, rather than the potential of others finding their own way as well, and participating in like a ongoing, like a quilt that is being woven together of all of these different new things that we are learning all the time. It does require a deep politicizing, man, I love that word, but I can't say it very well. Depoliticizing
you're an
of
American.
the yeah. But a depoliticizing of things is really important to all of that. And so, transpersonal creates all the opportunity for those things to happen. And so that's why the participatory approach is the growth of the experiential.
Yeah, 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 I agree.
Yeah. And so I believe that, we are going to have this great opportunity to transform all of these institutions. We're going to participate in the transformation of these institutions, and it's going to be really difficult. It's going to be a real challenge. We're probably really going to get hurt. It's kind of a sad truth that we will be hurt in the process, because that's what happens in your transformative process. And
Mhm.
so for me, you used spirit along with those things. So I used body, mind, soul because of fixing the individual as
Mhm.
representation of the whole. And so spirit is like the collective consciousness of mind, and then there's like the collective body of society and infrastructure and organization and things. So there are the bigger collective bodies of those things, and spirit is the collective body of soul. It is the in and through all things is spirit, but the transformation of the individual informs the transformation of the whole. To me, that is the bottom up approach. That is
Mhm.
the it takes people like you, myself, the viewers of this conversation. It takes people like us to be very courageous in going through the fires of your own internal destruction of all the things that you need to unlearn and reach deeply, dive deep into the farthest reaches of your own human nature, and then dig something out that is, akin to spirit, that is our divinity emerging forward, rising from the dirt, rising from the mud. And I think that we do see more of that happening all the time. We do see more people kind of waking up to their divinity. There was something that I haven't been able to paraphrase very well, but it was this idea that, like, we have like a Jesus and Buddha, a Muhammad. We have these like key spiritual figures, these prophets and things like that, right? Of
Like
history.
actual religions.
Yeah, of actual religions and these prophets of religion and things like that. So they've been the initiators of these great big organizing bodies of religion. Well, these people lived 2,000 years ago, more than that for some of them. So it's like these are thousands of years old people. An enlightened person today, they aren't the only time and opportunity for anyone to be enlightened, or whatever that concept, whatever that idea might mean to you, the viewer. But they aren't the only ones or the last ones to ever realize the truth that God is us, we are God, all of that, that relationship. They're not the only ones to ever realize the relationship with God to the significant profundity of how they realized it and what that created as a result of that.
Yeah.
They were just kind of the first people speaking of it at a level that they were speaking of it as. And so the
Mhm.
paraphrase is something like, we'll say, a Jesus of today, whoever that is. I don't care if it's you, I, or neither, but whoever the Jesus of today is, that Jesus has a more expanded vision
Mhm.
of the universe and of God, just because of being in a new age. The universe is ongoingly expanding. There's new experiences added into this like big motherboard database of experience in the world of awareness, and new lenses are continuing to complexify. The universe is continuing to complexify over the span of time. And so an enlightened individual of today has a more complex opportunity to see the world and all of its glory, and the universe and all of its power, and all those beautiful things. we
Yeah.
we participate in all of that.
Absolutely, and this, I think, also is why many of the scholars are calling this age the second Renaissance. Or we can go into the age of the Aquarius as well. But I think this is what it means. They were the prophets. They were the first, to come and speak that story. Although personally, I'm not sure. Like, this is the first time we are in this transition. I think there have been ages of awakening before. It's just a question of whether history speaks of it or not. But they were the first comers, and that's what I wanted to say about Jung, and say about Wilber, and many of these fathers of these thinkers, is also that they were the pioneers. And that's again where I give slack, because they were the pioneers, they were the first ones, and they had their cultural heritage and background, and their fires of life, which made them, which again informed the ideas and the frameworks they came out with. But now, like in this kind of second renaissance, after these pioneers and after these prophets, I think this is the time of collective awakening, which means that there isn't going to be one Jesus, there isn't going to be one Muhammad, although they may be out there too, and maybe I have even met some or heard some, but uh, but I think we are in a point where we co-awaken and co-create, and this is precisely the questions we are trying to live and ask in the new paradigm navigators as well. You know, what does it look like to co-awaken, and how can we find these people, use the technological age, you know, which isn't yet hijacked. For example, I have been on TikTok for the last 2 years, and I think TikTok really was that age for a couple of years. Now it has also been hijacked. Like, I mean, people are still using it, and there is also the new Fiesta that opened up. But at the same time, I also see precisely where it's been politically hijacked. What kind of topics aren't coming through anymore? What kind of accounts are being blocked, and what kind of topics are being shushed? And there are less than there were with Meta, you know, Facebook, Instagram, Google, all that. But still, now this has been hijacked too, so now we are waiting for the next kind of wave of novelty, where we can grow as this mycelium of new consciousness, honestly. And also personally, I am, like, I think like you, as a Western kind of thinker or individual, I am also put the emphasis to the individual, that I think our growth phase of the last 2000, maybe more years, has been, and with all the pain and all the shadows that come with it, has been precisely the individuation, which Jung and alchemists before him talked about, which is precisely the Jesus myth, and or the Jesus image, and the hero's story or the hero's journey, which is to come to kind of solidify yourself, but not just your ego. Ego is the first phase, but then to transcend the ego, to find the soul, and then to have bring the soul into this reality, kind of get the ego to serve the soul, and then through the ego the soul can realize itself and its mission, and through the soul the spirit can kind of come into this reality, and we can have the third conjunctio, which Jung and alchemists spoke of, which is the reconnection with the unus mundus, or we can just call it the mystical union, the consciousness and matter, you know, really intertwining, or consciousness waking up in the matter, which is what I really loved about the art, which is what art is trying to, or at least great art is aspiring to. Years ago, I was in Spain, in the southern part of Spain, in Jerez, and even further south, basically almost in Africa, or Egypt, you know, and I saw churches that are like 2000 years old, that were carved out of stone, and on the walls there were carved all these nature motifs, all these plants, all these vines and flowers and all that. And I was looking at it and thinking, like, why, what does it mean? But then I realized, that this is what's the job of art, to make us realize that, hey, this is precisely the project of life and existence here, which is life and consciousness to come into matter, in one sense to make life and consciousness immortal in matter, but also to make matter come alive.
Two aspects of what you just said, I think, are so beautifully put. Matter being enlivened into the world, essentially, and then also for, you know, the lived organism to be immortalized in the material world as well. That's beautifully put. And then what you said, the ego being transformed, I would say it this way, like the ego being transformed by the soul so that it could do more of the spirit's work. I really love Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo has a beautiful book. His work is called The Mother. It's about like the mother's work. And so he had written this chapter that I loved to recite from or reference, is about money, and the idea of gaining resources, gaining monetary value, is to do more of God's work. So So for him, he was saying that, the reason that we acquire resources in this world, I'm not a shunner of capitalism. There are pros, cons, evils, and good that is all involved in capitalism. It's not a perfect system. Democracy, not a perfect system. Maybe a new system can be created. I don't know what that would look like. Maybe this one can be transformed in the ways that it needs to be transformed. But whatever that might be, it is still a beautiful idea that all of the work that we are doing to gain more resources in this material world is to do more of God's work. So to transform, for the soul to be more realized through the transformation of the ego, so that the spirit, so that God as Remo can understand and live the experience of you or myself or of the viewers here, anybody viewing this conversation. God, I saw that, I see often this prayer, kind of like a Christian prayer, like somebody that is going around and just wants to pray with you, and they will speak that Jesus loves you, Jesus wants to have a relationship with you. It is, all things are possible through Christ. Through Christ consciousness, all things are possible. They'll make that prayer, that Jesus wants a relationship with you. Well, your relationship to God is there, and there's always an opportunity for you to be what God is aiming for you to be actualized in the word and vision of what God has, for you, in the many points of view and perspectives, and the many unique iterations of the human being that you and I and all of us are. You have this immense, amazing opportunity, and it doesn't come from shying away from the things that are happening as they are happening. There's war around the world, and that's terrible. And we should do everything that we can to stop that. And everything that we can do to stop that is also, it's also interwoven in this material world, in the world that we live in, which is capitalistic. And a lot of these thoughts are definitely heavily informed by myself being an American. That I'm not claiming to be unaffected by the American ideology or things like this. I'm definitely also influenced by my surroundings, but I am not like trying to get off grid and get away from the
Mm-hmm.
workings of the inner city because I'm so negatively affected by it. I'm trying to transform it from the inside out, just like we ourselves as individuals are transforming ourselves from the inside out, so that we can be actualized, individuated in those Carl Jungian or Maslow terms. We can be individuated, actualized, so that we can just keep doing more of God's work, immortalizing the organic body in the material, or making the material immortalized in the organic body, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I wonder what that looks like in terms of like the singularity of technology and the
Mm-hmm.
human. I don't even want to go there. And
to
that's like a counter to what I just said, to not shame away from it, but whatever. You know,
to
I'm just saying we can't be afraid of the world as it is right now. It's not for us to like kind of revert back to the times of Christ. It's not for us to
Mhm.
revert back to a world like that. It's for us to continue forward in whatever the new world continues to grow into.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. To bring heaven on earth. That's there are really beautiful ideas from the Western religions as well, to realize love, to become the living embodiment of love. What it really means to embody Christ. There are beautiful ideas, and I also agree with not shying away from the reality of today. I consider myself a realistic optimist, which means that I see a good outcome and I'm striving towards that, but I'm also realist in where we are situated. And also personally in my life, I've had all those phases of being a hippie, romanticizing nature, then actually moving into nature, living a farm life for a year, living with the actual natural cycles and animals, and working the land. It was healing. It was profoundly healing and integrative as a phase. But quite soon I also realized that no, this is not the life I want to live, and this is the life that is possible to live when this is your life to live, or when this is your calling, when this is your what you want to do, because it's hard. It's freaking hard. And if you go into any rural areas of today, whether it's in India or China or you know any other place, and you ask people who are there not by choice but because of their upbringing or culture, or they've just been born there, many of them will tell you that I would move to town even if I had to be a slave in a factory. Even then I would still pick that, because then there is at least the opportunity and possibility to move away from that rural life. And I'm not saying that it's always bad. You can be a modern farmer, but even modern farmers, they are not having the greatest time with all these institutions and political interests pressing down on them. They're basically doing the impossible. They don't even own, in a lot of the cases, in a lot of countries, they don't even own the land they are working. They barely own their own houses, not to talk about the tens of millions of investments into the machinery they have. They're barely paying the interests with subsidizes. They're barely affording to pay their machinery and the things they need to be doing the work. So, and next to working 12 and 14-hour days, probably more when the season is demanding. So that's something I would say to the romantics as well, that of course you can do permaculture, you can do um homesteading, which again isn't really as easy as some people make it look like on Instagram, because I have some friends who are doing it. But of course you can do that when it's your calling, and probably you can also find a balance between homesteading, living kind of in the countryside, while also having city not too far from you, maybe an hour or two away from you, which isn't breaking your neck when you actually want to socialize. Because what I felt after having lived half a year in the countryside, I felt like really isolated. I was having like serious anxiety when I went to town and saw the street lanterns and random people I didn't know. It was actually scary for me. So I think the overall view is that I think there's purpose and reason why we are where we are. Why we're in this capitalistic, into individualistic, consumeristic society. Why we're in this urban environment, and tying that back to psychology, why we have these egos, which I think are related to our environment as everything. So yeah, but I think like my personal longing, yeah, my heart's longing really is to live in an enchanted world, to live in awe, to chase beauty, to chase truth, and not at the expense of others. Live with my heart, and try to re-enchant, if not for others, at least for myself, the world. Because I think this spiritual, like we spoke about in length, that this spirituality and magic isn't really the farthest reaches. It's the original religion without church, the original way to experience and perceive the world, while at the same time, of course, embracing the technological advancements, which have been beautiful. You mentioned the time of Jesus. I think, like, I don't know, probably 90% of people were living in adversity, many of them starving to death, many of them, really not having a great time. And this is, when you read about Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism, makes a really good point that life is suffering. Like, if I ask my friends, like friends who are actually living and being somewhat successful, at least, they wouldn't agree with that doctrine. Of course there is suffering, and there is definitely some unnecessary suffering. There is war, there is famine in parts of the world, but if you ask, like, I don't know, half the population, like, is life suffering, then I don't think they will wholeheartedly agree, even though this massive propaganda operation and the legacy media has done like a lot of damage to the belief and maybe life will of ordinary people. And there are issues, of course, but I don't think life has to be suffering. So yeah, and I deeply honor and love indigenous people and tribes and their worldviews and life, just view the way they are perceiving and feeling and intuiting at the world around them.
As far as the indigenous and those like maybe like indigenous teachings and wisdom and tradition, such a big heart for people that are holding on and continuing to keep those kind of traditions alive, to keep those indigenous teachings alive. Like my heart is so is so big for those people, like so much of my heart for those people that are doing that work, keeping that alive. And as we maybe strive for balance between outer city world and the city life, like, we strive for balance in the social, like still having the social skills to interact with people without having a debilitating, anxious experience. If we can combine those things, the logical the logical next step is just to participate in the co-creative next level of what that is. So how do we take this and integrate it into our lives, and what does the next iteration, what's the next phase of that look like in our modern day lives? I think that the field of transpersonal psychology is like the biggest opportunity to do that, to do those things, and to really lead the way. It's a beautiful thing that we
Amen.
have this
A
this
woman.
blessed opportunity and responsibility. Of just having this conversation with you and the new paradigm navigators. It always makes me feel enthused, so much energy in me right now. Like I'm so excited about the work that we do, that we are really blessed to found ourselves in this kind of work. Like there's lots of people that would like to do something like, oh, you talk about spirituality and the new world, the new paradigm. I would love to do that. I'm sure there's a lot of people that we've been blessed to be able to have the skills, the interests, observing experiences, that maybe even the adversity that we have faced over the span of our lives, like that has all been blessings for us to be where we are today, to do the things that we are doing. It's amazing. The suffering of the people, getting out of suffering is like the goal of Buddhism, letting go of suffering. I was mentioning to you before that I had such a transformative conversation about birth on the podcast. The conversation about birth, it was with Victoria Rose, and she has been at the Eurotas conference. I met her at the Italian Eurotas conference. And Victoria Rose, she's speaking about birth. Birth is such a beautiful thing because it's such a metaphor for all of the things that we are talking about right now. Birthing things into the world.
Hmm.
It's all the metaphoric storyline of the hero's narrative. What she talked about was that mothers are under this like false impression that birth is supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be difficult.
Mm.
And she even just spoke about the experience of being a woman. There's this false narrative that it is supposed to be hard, that menstrual cycles and birthing and having to give up your body for the child and all these things, it's supposed to be so challenging. But that for her was a false narrative. She said that it's really about like you have a divinely imprinted genetic blueprint to make all of this effortless, and it's all of the suffering is in our minds, and that's the lesson of Buddhism, is that we can learn to get out of our own ways and not stay static in our suffering, stuck in the mud. We don't have to stay there. We can be released from that and just get back to our divine blueprint. If we're back in our divine blueprint, our genetic blueprint, then things should be more effortlessly. Maybe not effortless. Maybe that is kind of a inappropriate, like not quite the right pointing, not quite the right word to point in the right direction, but maybe flow is better. But it could be a flowing experience of life, of your creative endeavors, all the things that you want to make in the world. And
Agreed.
that can be applied to everything. It can be applied to business and family life and relationships and creation on the canvas, painting on the canvas, writing essays. It can be applied to everything.
Agreed. Agreed. Totally. Totally. And I also wanted to add about, this critical thinking, that, we might be losing critical thinking skills, but at the same time, Travis, we are the generation that grew up with One Piece.
Love One Piece. One Piece is the best. Ball
So
Z, One Piece, all of those great fan favorites for sure. we
Naruto.
are we are a generation that does have the critical thinking aptitude that we need. We just need to continue to apply this to the new paradigm, to navigating that new paradigm, shifting in that new paradigm. For me, it's the transformation through the gray areas. The black and white is never where the transformation happens. It's through the gray. And
Hmm.
I just so happen to be blessed with this name. It's there's a bridge between the black and white, and that is the gray, just in the ways
Hmm.
of aligning with my own narrative, which is work that I think we should all do in our own personal narratives. That gray is the mystery and the possibility and the potential, and it's it's all the organic body being immortalized in the material world and beyond. So this was a beautiful conversation, Remo. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Big thanks to you for having me, and also to any of the listeners who came with us this far. And I also think that people are ready for these long format discussions. Rogan is usually doing 3 hours, sometimes even more than that, and sometimes having whiskey, sometimes having a blunt next to the conversations. So people are ready. People are ready, and yeah, and I'd end with my own kind of image or brand which has carried me through the last years, which is the inner empire, which means to really find and build your own home within, which could be all the practices and knowledge and experiences that really enables you to step into that flow that you talked about as much as possible, to build your own faith, like the transpersonal psychology allows us to do, our own individual, that like intimate faith that rings true to us, but at the same time that which allows us to connect to others, to connect to the world as much as we can, as happy as we can be, and as home as we can be. So this is what I'm trying to build, and this has been my own quest to find this capital H home, and to build it where necessary.
I love that. It reminds me very much of the psychosynthesis Roberto Assagioli work inside to build that home, discover what that home looks like. And it is like you can build, if you don't feel like you already have that inner kingdom inside yourself, you can build that.
Hmm.
You can be a participator in the co-create. You're co-creating with aspects of yourself to build whatever that looks like inside of you. And that's a powerful opportunity to be the agent of your own transformation, to do that, to do that
Absolutely.
conscious to do that conscious process, participate in that conscious process. So that's beautiful things that you're doing. So I just want to let people know where to find you. I can be found at Gray Transforms on Instagram, at Gray Transforms, YouTube channel, Gray Transforms. If there's other transpersonal scholars out there listening to the conversation, we have a Transpersonal Collective a Facebook group. I do a professional group the first Saturday of every month, just trying to support and develop us as transpersonal scholars. And as we are navigating the new paradigm, I want us to be able to be there to support each other, going to conferences, publishing articles, things like this. So you can find
Exactly.
me in
Yeah.
all those areas. My personal Instagram is at Gray T PhD. So that's great PhD. And where can they find you, Remo?
Yeah, people can find me on Instagram. I'm at Soul Notions. Soul Notions, one word. And the NPNs can be found at newparadigmnavigators.community is our webpage, and New Paradigm Navigator podcast you can find on Spotify and YouTube. And last words also, I'd say that hit us up. Let's join forces. Let's have great conversations, and we have the power and agency to transform, to self-transform, but we also have the power and opportunity to do it together with others. My favorite meme is that when, like, from Chinese folk tale, is that little dragon asks panda, whether which is more important, the journey or the destination, and panda says it's a company. Let's get together.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, definitely let's do this together. Thank you so much for the conversation once again. We'll have more like this.
Who is this man talking?